Hello, everyone. I'm going live with Christine Smith, my friend, and I hope that wasn't didn't make me disappear there. I accidentally bumped something. Okay, so I'm going live with Christine. Hopefully, she will join me here. Let's see. Oh, there she is. Hello, hello. Hi, Jen. Okay, so Christine, here we go. Aha! Look at that. Look at that.
Hello.
You doing Instagram?
Yes, getting better at it.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good, long time no talk. Saw you yesterday.
Yes. I enjoy our chat.
Uh, so introduce you to everybody. This is Christine Smith, and I met her at Mindshare in October. It was October, wasn't it, when we were there?
Yes,
Yeah,
it was. I know, time flies.
I know. I can't even believe it's like halfway through November. It's like I feel like October didn't exist. Like you went through the summer, and then like October and November were like boop.
Yep, pretty much.
August, right? Like it's crazy. So, yeah, so today we're just gonna kind of wing it a little bit, but I wanted to talk about like what you do, and I you were sharing with me about all the different forms of chiropractic care, and I wanted to talk about that because um as over like this year and next year, we're talking a lot about like stress and trauma and how these things show up in your body and different modalities and ways that we can support our health. And I have really found that chiropractic care and acupuncture are extremely helpful. And where there is stress and trauma, there's a lot of time um, physical imbalances that will show up, whether that be like in the gut or on the skin or in your hormones, which we talk a lot about on here, but then also just structurally, there's a lot of stuff that can go wrong. Your muscles tense up and your neck gets a crick or you sleep wrong and all these different kinds of things happen. And so I'm interested in learning, a little bit more about what you do and then also the different like forms of chiropractic care. You were telling me that there are quite a few different practices. Oh no, I think she got booted off here. Ah, oh no. Let's see. Hi, Anne. How are you? All right. Hopefully she'll join us back here in just a second. Okay. Let me restart this for her. Oh no, here she is. She's coming. She's coming.
Sorry about that. Technology battles. Yes. Okay. So we were talking about stress and this
Yeah.
year of those things.
Yeah.
Apologies.
Connected. I was kind of talking about how it shows up in our body in a lot of different ways, and sometimes that is structural, and how chiropractic can be extremely helpful. And you were sharing how there's a lot of different versions and approaches. So why don't you just introduce yourself and then talk about that connection a little bit, and like what the heck what for you?
What the what the heck is chiropractic besides cracking things? Yes, absolutely. Happy to. I know that's what people's minds tend to go to is like you go to the chiropractor, you get your back cracked, but it's so much more than that and so much deeper than that. So there are a ton of different approaches in chiropractic of how you can approach the body, because really the entire goal of it is to balance the nervous system. So when you talk about stress, most people know the term fight or flight. It's kind of that, it's the state of stress that is good and needed sometimes. It's what allows you to like rush around at work and get things done and like be on top of your game and go and just get through the to-do list. But it is also the one that is turned on when you're running from the tiger, or dealing with something stressful in your life. And so that can be tied to the to-do list. Like that to-do list can be a very stressful thing. So it has its purpose biologically. But our biology has not evolved at the same rate that our society has. And so what people run into a lot now is that you're running from the tiger all the time because you always have a to-do list and you always have bills to pay and you always have that thing coming up or you always have this thing going on for work. And you kind of get stuck in this state. And the nervous system is very much, it's kind of like a muscle, like anything else in your body. It's like the more that you do that thing, the stronger that part of you is going to get. So if you are always living out this stressed state in your sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight state, that's where your body is going to tend to reside and tend to operate, because that's what it knows as homeostasis, or its state of balance, because it's the most common thing. So chiropractic is an opportunity to kind of give your other nervous system, which is the parasympathetic system. Obviously, they're all part of the same system, but they kind of work in concert. So it's like you either have your sympathetic system on and your parasympathetic system lower, or the reverse. And so they kind of work like this, and they're always doing that. And that's how we adapt to our environments. That's how you can go from getting stuff done, doing the to-do list, all of those things, to coming home in the evening and then slowly getting ready to go to bed as the parasympathetic nervous system turns on. And that's what you need to sleep. It's what you need to digest. It's what you need to properly rest and heal. And that goes into how our body basically either produces energy or builds structures like muscle. And you have to have the balance of those two nervous systems to do both. So chiropractic focuses a lot on how can we balance that? How can we take your system out of a fight or flight state and bring you into more of a balanced state between the two? Every once in a while, you'll get that patient who's kind of stuck in the parasympathetic state, because that's possible too. And that's when you're like really lethargic and just like cannot motivate yourself to do anything. And you're just kind of feeling sluggish and like you can't get into that get up and go mode. So there is both of them, but most of us tend to be stuck in that sympathetic state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jumpiness and things,
Yep.
get easily startled, wired but tired, those sorts of.
Exactly. My quick check for myself of like, all right, where is my system? Even when I think I'm calm, is when I close my eyes, how much are my eyelids fluttering?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll use that for patients too. So like when they lay down on the table and they close their eyes, just looking at that, or like looking at how they're laying on the table, like are they relaxed or are they kind of rigid? Like that'll just cue me into like where are they at today? And in chiropractic, we talk a lot about matching somebody's tone. And the first time that was said to me, I didn't quite understand it. But as a practitioner, when you have someone lay down on the table, or at least from the place of chiropractic that I work from, is very much about listening to someone's system, meeting their system exactly where they're at. So like if they're in kind of a stressed out state, it's like you are gently entering, you're kind of going slowly, you're not like bam, 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 quickly going into their system. You're kind of respecting whatever state their system is in and being very honoring to it. And then that way you can kind of help facilitate and bring them down. So you kind of match wherever they're at. And then you work with your own energy as the practitioner to kind of help guide their system to a place of more balance. And so when it comes to types of chiropractic, like there's kind of a spectrum. There's the practitioners that tend to operate with a lot of logic and analysis and using a ton of imaging and like measuring angles and all these things and being very specific based on imaging and x-rays and those types of things. And they are excellent practitioners. Then there are the kind of other end of the spectrum, which is known a little bit more as kind of like a vitalistic practitioner, or like straight chiropractor, they'll call them, which is like much closer to the very old philosophy of chiropractic. They both work together and like they both use pieces of each, but there's such a spectrum of it. And in the more kind of vitalistic sense, it's a lot more about listening to the body and kind of feeling into the tissues. You might use other tools, something like muscle testing, which is essentially treating the body a little bit like a circuit board, because people forget that we are electrical beings. We have our own biofield and that kind of thing. And so you can actually work with somebody's body and kind of almost ask it questions. And it's basically working with the stress response. So you can like touch an area of dysfunction on the body. So say someone has an injury to their shoulder, I can kind of go around in the shoulder and touch an area that's stressed. And then all of a sudden, some of their other muscles don't respond as well. And that is the body essentially being like, ooh, don't touch that area. I'm protecting it. And so I can actually use other muscles to be like, oh, this is the tissue that needs some help. And it's a little bit more of a subjective method, but it's a great thing to do in person. So there's methods like that. And the more kind of vitalistic, the core philosophy and foundation of chiropractic goes into these essentially 33 principles that are all oriented around basically balancing the body and balancing the nervous system, because the nervous system and the signals that it sends are your life force. And that is what tells your organs to digest, or your heart to beat, or your muscles to work, anything. All the stuff that you don't have to think about, breathing, like that's all your nervous system. And so in the really foundational philosophical realm of chiropractic, it's about facilitating the flow of that life force through the body, which is where it joins into other modalities in a similar way, like acupuncture. So acupuncture talks about meridians, and it's about helping energy flow through the body and clearing blockages and all that kind of stuff. So I find a lot of alternative medicines work with really similar principles, but maybe just like address it from a slightly different angle.
Yeah.
And then in the middle of that spectrum, you have what some people call the mixers, which is what I kind of am. So I learned from some really incredible philosophical chiropractors that were very much about listening, and it's really changed the way that I adjust. And every patient I adjust, every time I adjust, it's quite different. So it's not the same every single time. Whereas if you're working off of an X-ray and an image, it tends to be really similar sometimes. So that's kind of where the differences can come in. And some people think you have to have a crack for chiropractic to work. Not true in the least. I have a bunch of patients who like, that's not their thing. They don't like it. I'm like, no problem. So I do a lot of gentler work with them, working with their ligaments, and all that crack is, it's a pressure release in the joint. And so I don't really care if it cracks or not, because it's just about like, well, how much did the pressure change? And so for me, it's about like, how are the muscles surrounding the area changing? How are they responding to the strength tests that I did? How has the sensation changed? How has the nervous system changed? How has their breath changed? How has their body language shifted? How have their eyelid fluttering? How have their eyelids changed? All of that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of other things to read rather than just the crack. And that's why chiropractic can be so vast. And there's even practitioners where it's like, you know, they work with maybe like 8 grams of pressure on different ligaments and areas in the body, and they're more energetically focused. That is like more network chiropractic, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's a bit of a long-winded answer, but that kind of gives a general idea of the spectrum.
No, as you're talking, I'm thinking about acupuncture, I'm thinking about Reiki, I'm thinking about massage, I'm thinking about like all of these different, they all are focusing on very similar things, right? Which is like moving energy through the body, releasing tension. And when we're talking about stress and trauma, there's like this somewhat new, somewhat old, but coming into conversation a little bit more, understanding about how like emotions and stress and life events like get stuck in the body. So I've even heard about like people getting massages that when done in the type of way that you're talking about, where it's less physical and it's more about listening to the body and responding to what the body needs and things like that. That during an actual massage, you will experience trauma release, maybe cry on the table because, you know, like your hips, for example, are said to store a lot of trauma because it's like the strongest part of your body. And so a lot of your trauma will go there. And if you're getting massages or adjustments or whatever in that area, you may experience like an emotional release while you're experiencing the physical release as well. I just find all of that like so fascinating, and I've never really heard anyone talk about chiropractic under those terms. I've heard about, you know, massage that way. Reiki obviously is like more of a emotional sort of energy movement thing. I've heard about, you know, acupuncture having to do with like moving energy, but I've never really heard people talk about a chiropractic adjustment in that way. So I find that fascinating.
It's it's really cool, and I think that's why I got sucked into going the alternative medicine route. I was very lined up to go to med school. I worked in research labs. I was my background's in neuroscience. I was going to go into neurology. I'd still be studying a lot in that right now, all that jazz. But I was listening to one of your other talks that you had done, and you spoke of like how so many functional medicine practitioners or people kind of in the alternative realm have entered it because of their
Yeah.
own things that they weren't able to resolve with the conventional system. And I have so much respect for the conventional system. I think they do amazing things. They save lives. And I think it is profound for acute care
Yeah.
and infections and emergencies.
Hmm.
When it comes to chronic stuff, that is where our conventional system is just not designed super well. And that is where alternative medicine and functional medicine and the stuff that you do, working on the gut and all of those things, can be so transformative for people, is because it's something that never got addressed. And I know for me, like as a teenager, what kind of happened is I was, you know, stressed and dealing with mood stuff and dealing with the irregular cycle. And so they're like, oh, like here's hormones, go on birth control. And I was like, okay, that's what everyone else is doing. I'm 16, I'm going to do that. And then they're like, oh, like your mood is being weird. Well, here, we're going to put you on antidepressants. And so then they put me on that for anxiety and stuff. And I didn't know anything better at the time. Now that I know what I know and I do what I do, I think back to that and it's like, that happened to me and no one did any kind of blood testing, any kind of lab testing to see what was going on. No one asked me a single question about my diet, which consisted of a lot of Dr. Pepper and like bagels with nacho cheese in high school because that's what the school store sold.
Yes.
No one asked me anything about that. And they didn't even give me a questionnaire. Like, nothing, no way to analyze me. They're just like, here, this is what we do, here you go.
Yeah.
As I have dove in, and I have like questionnaires that I'll work with people. I'm also a certified brain health coach with the Daniel Amen clinic, and there's a lot of questionnaires I can use to like analyze your neurotransmitters. And this is just stuff that you answer. Like, we don't even have to send in a lab test yet. Why they don't do that in conventional medicine, I don't understand. But now that I have researched that and I've researched neurotransmitters and done those things, as I found out about my body, I found out that they put me on the worst antidepressant I could have been on for my body. Like the one that they put me on, it just did not, like, it made my problem worse. I had anxiety, and the neurotransmitters it was working with were the ones that like perpetuate anxiety. So then my anxiety got worse and worse and worse from age 16 to, you know, 21 or so. And I never really understood what was going on. And I thought like I was just the problem. And then it progressed to having panic attacks where I like couldn't control my physiology, and I would like literally like black out on an exam, or like my heart would race, or like I couldn't handle stress. And I'm like, what in the world is wrong with me? And then you always think that it's your fault, right? Like you're not enough, you're not a strong enough person. You're not resilient enough. Like you just need to get your insert curse word there together. And all of that stuff. And then finally I ended up seeing a practitioner who was he was a physical therapist, but he ended up doing like nervous system physical therapy, and I ended up getting certified in it because this is what brought me into this realm. But it was based on touch sensation through the skin, so it was all based on skin stuff, and basically used different types of touch along with a little bit of cognitive behavioral therapy and some breathing techniques. And I saw him 3 times, and it was a total of like 6 hours. And after that, I never had another panic attack, and I got off all medications. And I was like, I need to understand what you just did to me. And that's when I went and got a dual major in psychology and did cognitive neuroscience to kind of understand the brain-body connection. And that's what led me into this realm. And I ended up working for a chiropractor who had, you know, an 8-month wait list and had people who were at the end of their rope and had been to 30 practitioners coming to him, and he'd have them feeling better in like 3 months. And it was all about balancing the system. And my male chiropractor was the first person who ever ran my blood labs, and my hormones were totally messed up, and no one had ever looked at them, including my female OB. And that just shocked me. And so then that led me down the whole realm of functional medicine. And what made me fall in love with chiropractic is because it's all about mitigating those stressors and balancing your system. So a lot of people will say like, oh, like once you go to the chiropractor, like you have to keep going, blah, blah, blah. Well, not really. Like, it's more like people keep going because they feel better and because they understand that it's like brushing your teeth. It's like you're cleansing your system, just like you're cleansing your mouth when you brush your teeth. You don't have to brush your teeth, but your tooth might fall out later. Just like you don't have to take care of your nervous system, but you might end up with dementia later. And so it's like all of those kinds of things. And it's about self-care and a choice to incorporate care as a regular thing. And one of the things I love about being this type of practitioner and seeing people more often is you have a practitioner who knows your body as well as you do and sees you regularly and knows your kids and knows what's going on in your life and knows when you're going through a divorce and knows when you're dealing with a stressor and is there for you and supporting you in whatever way that you need on this like regular, consistent basis. And I have patients that don't see me for a few months and then just come back when they're in pain. But I'll tell you that their injuries don't get better as fast because we're not working on it consistently. And then they continually deal with these things. Whereas if I have someone come in more regularly, then usually we can work through the scar tissue. We can work through those things. And you were talking about like emotional releases from this stuff. And absolutely, they get stored in the body and like in scar tissue. And in chiropractic, we call it retracing. So it's like when you have life events and they're overly stressful, your body will store them in your tissues to basically protect you. And if you think about like with animals, if you have a gazelle and it's running from a cheetah or something, and then the cheetah catches it and the gazelle gets away, when it gets away, it'll go through this process where like its whole body will shake. And that's the freeze discharge. So we have fight, flight, and freeze. So freeze is kind of like when you've realized the predator has you and you've given up and your body goes into paralysis so that you don't feel pain when the animal eats you. But we will get stuck in that as humans because we don't really go through this freeze discharge. So chiropractic is kind of a way to facilitate that discharge and facilitate releasing that nervous system tension. And sometimes if you're working on scar tissue or working in a certain area, it can release emotional tension. So I tell people after like their first time being adjusted, like, hey, you might possibly be emotional later today. And I had a client who she had our appointment and then she went straight into a therapy appointment afterwards because that was just her schedule for the day. And she said that she like cried and released more than she ever had in her therapy appointment. And it was the first time she'd ever been adjusted. So it's interesting. And we find, at least as a practitioner, I find people have layers. So it's like, I'll have to work through the layers and someone will come in, they might be really, really tight and I'll work with them in a really gentle way. And that's where I really like listening to the body. Like if I start to move in to do an adjustment and I'm feeling guarding in the body and I'm feeling the body resist it, I'm not going to do it because it changes the cellular response. You can totally power through that. A lot of chiros do. This is where everyone has different opinions. For me, if I power through a muscle that's guarding, those cells are going to release a signal that says stress. If I wait and I wait for this window where their body invites me in and they're in a relaxed state, it sends a completely different chemical signal and reprograms their brain in a different way. So I will wait and work with people. So it's like that first appointment, we might work through that top layer. We might be working more on tissue stuff. The next appointment, we might get a little bit deeper. The next appointment, we might be able to get more structural. So it's like, it's just about seeing where people are at and respecting their body and respecting their system and understanding that everyone moves at a different speed and every single client is different. And so it's about like where you're at and what you need to release at that time. And I have one client, she came into me with a drop foot because she had a pinched nerve in her back. And she was really scared and everything was focused on strength in the leg and the foot. And I was like, okay, let's get you out of pain, number one. And that's what we did. She's been seeing me for a couple months now. Drop foot's gone, totally better. No surgery, nothing. We were able to resolve it. And then she came in the other day and every once in a while, I'll just get this kind of hit of like, ask this person this question. And I just said, how's your spirit? And she just like broke down and told me about all these stressors that are going on in her life and stuff. So that appointment, I focused more kind of on the energetic side of things. And I introduced her to the concept of chakras, which is like swirling pools of energy in your body that are related to emotions and states of being. And I gave her some resources where she could explore that on her own. And I don't think we ever would have gotten there if I had made that our first appointment. She would have been like, I'm out of here, like, no way. And so we had to work our way into that. But she really enjoyed it when we got there. And some people, that's the first thing I talk about with them. And then we work more into structural stuff. So it just depends on where people are at and what they need, because everyone stores stuff differently.
I'm so fascinated by just like body work in general, people that are body workers, because you know, even the way you're talking about responding to the body with chiropractic adjustments, I've had massage therapists that are you know just massage, or people that are incredibly in tune with your body, and it's such a completely different experience. And when you have somebody that can listen to your body and really understands like what it's saying and what it needs, it's just, it is completely out of this world different. And then every time you go for a session, it's different because you're in a different place mentally, emotionally, and physically, right? So talk about chakras a little bit. That's not really talked about on Instagram. So like, how does how can you work with that with chiropractic? Is it just the location of adjustment? You know, like what goes into, you know, approaching that with what you do?
Sure. So, like I said before, so I was like very left-brained, very much in the research academia realm. And then I've, through the last few years, kind of started facilitating more of my right brain and just being kind of open-minded to things. And being open to the idea that there's so many things in this world that we are barely scratching the surface of understanding, and we are such complex beings, and the brain is probably the most complex thing in the universe. There's articles that say that our brain actually works in 11 dimensions, and you actually like store your memories in the cloud outside of your head, which is pretty amazing.
God, I love it.
No, seriously, you think about magnetic resonance imaging, like they are measuring your brain waves with a device that doesn't touch your head. Your thoughts exist outside of you. Like that is your biofield.
There's all this stuff too where like so yeah, you're talking about your biofield and you're talking about energetic resonance and all this kind of stuff. I mean, there's so much that like doesn't make it into the mainstream, like news articles or like conversation, and it's stupid because it is actually science. And I don't even remember where I saw this, but it was they were talking about how your body emits light, and you know, literally scientifically, you have an aura, like it is a thing. And how when parts of your body have disease, like they're not giving off light, or the light is dimmed. It's very different than like a healthy part of your body, right? And like, so it's just very, very interesting. And then there's light upon conception. When a sperm touches an egg, there is a burst of light. You know, life at, you know, conception is what I believe. And I think science essentially has proven that. Because at the moment of death, you also give up light as your spirit leaves your physical body. Light is released, and they've documented this. So I absolutely, yes, thoughts in the cloud. Absolutely believe that's probably a thing. That is kind of funny, and it made me think of that.
I mean, I remember when I first got brought back to it, right? Because it's that stuff. I also just kind of like, I had a disconnect from it earlier in my life. And that's kind of where I turned to science. Is I was like, I want clear-cut answers with evidence that I can understand. And then through that, I got into biology, which led me to chemistry, which led me to physics, which led me to quantum physics, which led me back to all the right brain stuff. And I was like, well, geez, okay, it's all connected.
As a Christian, I often
My sound just cut out. I don't know if yours did.
yeah, I was
There we
getting a
go.
call, so I think that it's super annoying. Like when like I stop, you know, just, I'm on a live, people. Don't you know? Don't call me right now. But no, I was saying as a Christian, I feel like a lot of times what I believe spiritually and what I know to be true, I end up finding science eventually kind of catches up to it in terms of like it. It's just fascinating to me, and I don't know if you have found this studying all of those different sciences, but the more I learn about works and the mathematics behind it and the structure behind it and the complexity behind it and the detail behind it, you go, it always points me to God, because I think it's so intentional, it's so beautiful, it's so structured, and there's so, how can this just happen? You know, and it's just a magnificent, wonderful, beautiful thing to learn.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, I think, you know, we throw the spiritual out and we think that science is so disconnected. I think you can't separate them. I think it is so intertwined.
I agree. And I think, I know like one of the things that I struggled with was there wasn't like a specific religion that I totally aligned with, but I ended up falling in love with kind of the idea of energy, because for me it's this all-encompassing umbrella that everything else fits under. And so it's like no matter your belief, no matter your background, no matter anything, you can still connect to this all-encompassing thing that makes up everything that we're made of, and that is energy. And that's the whole idea of quantum. And so let's see, you asked me about chakras, and I'll try to tap into a couple things. So one, you're mentioning light emitted from the body. I don't know if you've ever looked up Kirlian photography. It's Kirlian, but literally it's this photographer who figured out how to capture the light being emitted from living organisms. Ooh. It's super cool.
Oh, you see, there's a new article or something that came out. Oh, this is so terrible. I don't even want to say it because it's gonna make people so upset. But it's about plants making sound when they die.
They are living.
So sad.
It's
so sad.
It's hard, and like, yeah, that it's tough because, you know, obviously all living beings have the opportunity to live, but I'm also a biologist, and it's like there's a cycle of life that goes on, and that goes back to like the Lion King and the circle of life.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know.
So
goes back to that point of like, not, there will never be a point, I feel like, where we understand everything about nature.
No. So for me, and this is something I'm still remembering to do, but if I'm, you know, cooking food or cooking plants or cooking animals, I remember with my intention to like thank that organism for nourishing me. Something I would like to make more of a regular practice and be a lot more mindful in. But when I can, I try to do that as often as I can, and then it at least shows an appreciation for that cycle, rather than it just being like a cycle of consumption. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so when we're talking about energy and chakras and those things, so my left brain always wanted to understand chakras more, because I think a lot of people get disconnected from them because they're like, swirling pools of the energy in the body, like what? That doesn't align with anything that I understand. No, I'm done. So how I understand it and how I look at it is I actually think that there is physiological evidence for it. So when we talk about chakras, the idea is it's this swirling area of energy that is stronger in one area of your body than another. When we talk about what swirling energy is, that's essentially a magnetic field. It's a toroidal field, and those fields are created by a charged particle in motion. And that's physics, just physics. And so then when you go down to how do neurons work by sending charged particles in motion. They send ions into motion. And so as a neuron fires and that charged particle that gets sent into motion, it actually creates a little magnetic field. It's like a battery. And when you have a bunch of neurons all in one area doing that at the same time, you create a larger magnetic field in that area. And when you look at the chakras, there's a lot of different theories, but the most commonly known one is that there's like 7 main ones in the body. We have way more than that if you dive into like the old stuff, but the basic 7 that most people know of line up with our neural ganglia, or meaning like areas in the body where we have conglomerations of neurons. So the first one is like at the base of your spine. The next one is kind of at your sacral plexus, or like where all those neurons near your sacrum conglomerate. The next one is kind of in your stomach area, where we have like the celiac ganglion and all of those ones innervating your organs. And then we have the heart and all of the nerves that innervate your heart. And then we have the throat, third eye, which has to do with like glands in the brain, and then your crown chakra. So I'll talk a little bit about each one if you want me to, but basically
I love it when people bring it back to the physical, like backing it up with the science behind it, because um and so that also goes back to, I think there's a lot of like wisdom from the ages that we throw out because science hasn't yet proven it, but we have all this anecdotal evidence, and I think we have to be careful because eventually, like I mentioned earlier, I feel like a lot of times science ends up catching up. Oh,
Well, and it's funny because I feel like science has been doing some weird things lately, and I think one of the most important parts of genuinely being a scientist, which like any researcher will agree with this, is the ability to admit that you're wrong.
right. Well, yes, because science is constantly growing and changing. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, not to get, quote unquote, political here with everything on this year, but there are a lot of people that don't actually want to follow the science and they have a lot of opinions when in reality, the entire time that we've been in since whatever, 2020, science is constantly changing because it's a new thing and they're researching it. And if you are a person of integrity and you actually want to follow the science, that means that throughout the past 2 years, the information would have constantly be changing because you're just getting the information. It didn't exist
Well,
before.
and to me, it's like the foundation of science is asking questions. And
Yeah.
as soon as you prevent people from asking questions, you're no longer doing science.
Well, and then there's the whole let's promote theories as if they're fact, and it's like that's just it's just a fascinating thing. People get stuck in that. Yeah, I think if you can't ask questions anymore or you can't be challenged, then you're not really interested in science. You're interested in a dogma at that point.
Well, and the irony of it is that like exactly what we're talking about ties back into the actual health component and the stress component that we're talking about. Because if you're in this state where you feel attacked or you feel like you can't express or you feel like you're in danger, it messes up your root chakra. And
If anybody on any side of the spectrum in the past 2 years has felt like they can't come out publicly and share an opinion that they have on something for fear of being attacked or not being safe,
or leave your house because you're afraid of being attacked, like
I raised my hand about 20 times because there have been times I don't know like how this is gonna go.
well, and then the irony of that, so there's a couple things that happen when you like enter this stress state, which is why I feel like the way that things are being handled and the way that the media has just like manhandled all of this has been really unfortunate and kind of detrimental to the goals.
Hold on 2 seconds. All these texts and I had to respond to one or else. Okay.
No
So
problem.
it was kind of an emergency. So uh okay, yes. So the media puts you in a fear state. The fear
Yes.
impacts your nervous system and it lowers your immune system. And so one of the best things I think that I've ever done is I do not watch the news. I don't listen to it. I don't watch it. I just don't.
It's hard, and I get it because sometimes you have to for like work or whatever. Because I was talking to someone who's like a financial planner, and they're like, "Oh, well, like I have to watch the news so that I know what the market's doing." I'm like, "Okay, cool. So let's talk about the intention that you watch it with." And so I think it's very much about like no matter what you're doing in your life, because like sometimes you have to do stuff. It's very much about the intent that you're doing it with, and like
Yeah.
where your mind is
Well,
at. As you're saying,
on it too, right? Like some people do like I'm going to do 15 minutes a day. I'm going to stick to this specific site maybe that isn't massively triggering or opinionated. It's just information, right? Like you can choose like how you do it. My belief, like sometimes I'll scroll like there's like news stuff on Facebook and I'll like read like the titles or whatever. My general opinion is if it's important enough, it will come into my understanding and my like someone will talk about it.
yes, I agree with that totally.
Like I don't need to like go searching for it. It will come into my understanding if it's a big enough deal.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And and like if you're just talking about like watching a news channel, I know like sometimes I'll go to, I don't really have TV at my house anymore. I have like internet that'll connect. And so like, but I don't I don't really like sit down and watch the news or watch commercials. And so now when I like go to somebody else's house that has TV and I see commercials and just like how loud they are and how intense they are and like the weird subliminal messaging that's in them that you completely get desensitized to when you're around it all the time, it's like it's kind of scary, and it's really bizarre.
System, just a challenge everybody could take, especially with how charged up everything has been for the past 2 years. Ditch the news, ditch it. If it's important enough, it will come back into your understanding. But do an experiment and get rid of it for like 2 to 4 weeks and see if your nervous system calms down, because it really is one of the most triggering things. It makes you feel unsafe. It makes you feel like you're in one group and other people are in another group. It's extremely separating.
Well, and it puts you into this like false reality where it's like if all you're doing is watching the news and never leaving your house, your reality consists of whatever they're telling you, versus if you're watching the news and leaving your house and talking to your neighbors and talking to other people that have different beliefs than you, then it's going to give you a more realistic reality.
Agree a little bit and still love each other. Like that's really like that's okay.
That's how we learn.
Like there's no room for that, there's no room for you have to be right and nobody else can but in reality, like you just said, you're talking to your neighbor, you're talking to this other person, like 9 out of 10 times you're going to be able to agree to disagree on religious, on politics, on medical, like all of these different things. And it's okay, because once you actually have a conversation with someone, you have empathy for that person and where they're coming from. Whereas if you don't actually get in community with someone, you just assume you know everything about them and they should automatically agree with you. It's like, and that's so triggering. It's so triggering. And your nervous system is going to be so shot after that. I know this is like so off topic, but
well, no, it's, they're all kind of intertwined. And if you're ever like, let's say you're at a social gathering, like I think something that's happening for people right now is like, we forgot how to socialize, and it's like hard now because we spent a lot of time alone, and and it's really awkward because everything's super polarizing now, and like you never know who you're going to be talking to and like what they believe or whatever.
Who's going to care about what, who's going to
bring what and you're trying to be respectful of them, but you're trying to hold your own boundaries, and it's hard. It's really hard right now. So my thing that I do, if I run into someone where it's just like, I'm like, okay, like it's clear that we're on different pages, I ask them questions. Oh, why do you believe that? Where did you hear that? Where did you learn that from? What do you think about this? And like I literally just sit there and ask questions, and then
best thing you can do. When we were at Mindshare, someone did that with me, and at first I thought this could potentially be a very uncomfortable conversation depending on how it was handled. Literally all he did was ask questions and have a conversation about like, I've talked to this person, what do you think about this? I've talked to this person, what do you think about this? Okay, this has been my experience in, all this kind of stuff. And it was so refreshing. I don't actually honestly know, like, I think some of the things we may have agreed on and some of the things we didn't agree on, but it literally, like, it wasn't a judgmental conversation. It was just, oh, you're going to ask me this and you're going to be okay. Like if I answer honestly, like heaven forbid, it was very interesting. So I think that's one of the best things is just to ask questions 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and then let's say that you have that stressful interaction and we want to bring it back to like how you can regulate your own stress. So let's say that you have some conversation with someone and like kind of triggers you or whatever. And then you watch the news earlier and they're telling you like the whole world is ending and all this stuff. And then realistically, we know that's not the case because this is not the first time this has happened and it certainly won't be the last. And somehow we've survived and done okay and the world will go on. And that's just biology. Like it's just how it works. But anyway, so let's say you have that stressful thing. Generally, the root chakra, which lays at the base of the spine, the color associated with it is red if you're a visual person. Some people just like to feel, some people like to visualize. But it's all about safety and security and tribe and community and feeling like you belong and feeling like you have support. And so the affirmation for that, or like the statement, is essentially like, I am. It's just like a state of existence and like, I am safe. I am here. And it tends to be blocked by fear, and it's about kind of releasing your fears and just letting them go. And, I think a lot of us, especially when you're in that survival state or the anxiety state, you tend to live in this place of everything that might happen that hasn't actually happened. And so you're not only running from the tiger, you're running from an imaginary tiger now, and that's even harder to escape. So if you can kind of focus on being in the present moment and focus on that base of your spine and kind of just taking a breath and letting yourself just like sit there for a second and just be in your body instead of being with that stressful person or with that stressful thought or worrying about what's going to happen tomorrow or in 20 years or whatever. And you just kind of ground yourself. It's also kind of just our grounding element. It's our earth element. So it's a way to kind of, like, one of my favorite visualizations, it's really quick. I actually do this before I work on any client to kind of like clear out other people's energy and clear out my own energy so that I'm fresh for them and I'm not bringing anybody else's stuff into their body. But basically just sitting and imagining your energy traveling down through your pelvis, through the floor, into the earth, through the bedrock and the granite, all the way down to the core molten center of the earth, which is this like warm orb. And then just kind of releasing any of your fears and your worries into that orb and letting the earth hold it for you. And then bringing that warmth and that energy back up into your body and seeing how you feel. And literally that could take 30 seconds. And it can just be like a really quick grounding technique. So if you're having that stressful moment, and like you can do this in the car when someone cuts you off, because that's something else I've noticed lately is everyone's just freaking angry on the road. And like, I'm just driving the speed limit and someone's like blowing past me, flipping me off. I'm like, I don't even know what I did. And my nervous system will
I
get
know.
stressed out of that.
People always try to make it personal. Like,
I think it's just a lot of people are angry right now and they don't know how to express it. And the road and the car is a place where you can do it without accountability.
yeah.
And so I find it's where a lot of people,
And
where it'll come out.
right, like trolls on the internet, you're hidden
Yeah,
by
100%.
or whatever, and you can just like let things out. And it's like, okay, again, you're probably, not interacting, you're not getting human connection, you're in your own environment, you're watching things that are basically pitting you against other people. And if that's your only input, your output is obviously going to be agitated, irritated anger.
Yeah.
And you have to get back into community, into touch, into transfer of energy, which is what happens when we spend time with other people. We absorb theirs, they absorb ours, and it's a very 90% of the time positive thing. Getting into nature and getting grounded. I love that grounding visualization is really important too. And even just talking about how nature itself is healing, touching trees, walking outside barefoot. You were talking about the ions in our body, and that's literally what it happens when you walk barefoot on the ground. You have this exchange of ions, and it helps literally ground you to feel more into the parasympathetic. So there's always like little things, right? And it's like, they're not complicated, right? It's like, don't watch the news, take some deep breaths, do a little visualization, make sure your body is physically feeling supported, mentally kind of like relax into the present moment and just remind yourself that currently in this moment you are safe, right? Because a lot of times like those fears and those anxiety come from like, what if, it's future stuff that hasn't happened, right? And it's important to plan, it's important to be proactive, it's important to think through things, right? But if we're in an anxiety state, we're not thinking clearly, it's important to like, okay, am I safe right now? If I'm not, let me get myself to a place that I am. How can I rest in that safety? How can I physically feel safe in my body? How can I calm my nervous system? You can go outside, you can lay on the ground, you can hug a tree, literally. There's grounding essential oils. There's like, people will hold rocks or crystals or whatever, because it's part of nature, it's grounding. There are different ones that are more or less grounding, right? Like there's all these different things that we can do to like bring it back into the physical body and remind ourselves that like in this moment we are safe, we're not actually in danger. Because what you're talking about, like you mentioned, is perceived danger, and our body will respond to perceived danger as if we are in mortal danger. It's the same physical response. So like just self that like, no, like it really is okay. Sometimes that's hard, but there's a lot there, I think, to unpack.
Oh, 100%. And it's like one of the things I want to speak to is how hard it can be. Like all of those things are very, very simple. Does not mean that they're easy. And
Mhm.
it's really hard to break habits. And I think that's what people struggle with the most. Like a lot of people know this stuff, they've been introduced to it, but then they just get stuck in the same patterns. And that's where I fell in love with Dr. Joe Dispenza's work. He has a book called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, How to Lose Your Mind and Create a New One. It's
Mm.
great. Dives into the science of meditation and cognition and the physics behind it. So for anyone who's like left-brained and trying to connect with this but having a hard time, his stuff is awesome. But it can be really hard to make these little changes. And like, I know, like I'm struggling with it myself. Like I'm not immortal or I'm not impervious to stress. Like all of this stuff has totally stressed me out,
Oh,
right? Oh
I
God, yeah.
trigger this morning and it really shook me and I was like really triggered um but one of the things I think that really helped today is that I had a lot of like interactions like these. I was like talking to people and being active and engaging with community and
Talking
it's
to the right people matters too.
yes.
So make sure that you get a balance of different kinds of people in your life that you're talking to.
Yes, yes, and that's so important. But that I think the thing that I kind of want to leave people with, and I do have to get going here in just a minute. Thing I think I really want to leave people with though is that community is that missing piece that we overlook, and we don't give it enough. Um, we just don't give it enough credit. I think that exchange of energy, whether it's virtual, it's better in real life. It's better in real life for sure. But the exchange of energy with safe people, like you just said, the type of person is important. Talking to them, seeing them, touching them. If like in person, it's so much better because we were talking about, body workers. I mean, why is that so healing? It's because you're exchanging energy and because someone is gifting you with this movement, this work, this touch, this community that I think we just really take for granted.
I have a Thich Nhat Hanh quote in my office, and it says, the most precious gift we can offer others is our presence. When mindfulness embraces those we love, they will bloom like flowers. And
Mm,
I love that as a practitioner because it's basically like you are holding space for someone to be on their journey and telling them that wherever they are is completely okay and they're exactly where they're supposed to be. And you're just supporting them as they decide to grow. And, that can start, we're talking about like how hard it is to implement these small things. It can start with as simple a thing as like, if you want to watch TV less in the evening, put your book in front of your TV so that when you sit down, you see your book and then you choose to read your book instead, and try to do that for like 3 days.
yep.
And just start there. Just start with like
Oh,
one simple, achievable thing.
hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Well, I love the connection between chiropractic, which I just feel like is so physical, into the spiritual, which an energetic realm, which is just so interesting to me. So thanks for talking about that.
Oh,
I
thank
love
you.
it. So I'm so glad you were able to join me today. Let people know what your handle is, how they can find you, etc.
Sure. So my handle, in general, I have, what was that?
If they're in the Denver area, they can work with you.
Yes. So my handle is depth, DEPTH _ wellness, like you have depth. And that's a lot of what my practice is about, is helping people kind of reconnect with the depth of themselves and the depth of their connection to life, and reconnecting with their bodies and kind of purpose, and just pulling us out of this like heady space we've been stuck in, especially the last 2 years, and remembering like what's around us and how to connect with bigger thoughts and ideas, which is why it's so great to get to talk with people like you or listen to things like this, is because you're listening to people talk about ideas and concepts and things that bring you into this realm of growth, rather than only being focused on the material world and the self and like what's happening right now. And that's kind of that survival state.
Mm.
And yeah, so my website is depthwellness.com. I'll also be running hopefully a kind of like a little challenge here soon of kind of how to just listen to your body throughout the holidays. I'm not going to ask you to change your food or anything during the holidays. That's hard. But I will start to teach you kind of how to get in touch with yourself, how to figure out what foods might trigger you in certain ways, how to just kind of work with those things and bring awareness to it. Um,
Talking about like so you can actually like listen to.
yes.
Yeah, cool.
Yep. And then, yeah, and if you're in the Denver area, that's where I'm located. So always feel free to reach out.
All right. Thanks, Christine. Go follow her on Instagram. Melanie, definitely make that connection. 100%. I see your comment there. Close to Denver. Might be worth the drive.
Sure. Yeah, I'm like Front Range, so kind of Arvada area too, in between Denver and Boulder.
Awesome. All right, Christine, I will talk to you soon. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Bye.